I joke that if you can make it doing state policy at TechNet, you can do anything.
Behind every major policy decision, every corporate strategy, every Washington power play are the insiders shaping the game and the new rules to win it. The Deciders, with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins and veteran DC strategist Lisa Camuso-Miller.
This episode of The Deciders is presented by American Edge Project.
Welcome to The Deciders, where we talk to the decision makers rewriting the playbook for effective advocacy in Washington. Today we're speaking with Linda Moore, who has served as the president and CEO of TechNet for more than a decade. Linda, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Linda, you were one of the first people supporting Bill Clinton's presidency. What brought you to Washington in the first place?
I came to D.C. in '86. I fell in love with politics and government when I was at University of Texas. I was elected to student government, and then I started working on my very first campaign when I was at UT. And then I realized, hey, you can actually do this for a living.
You were one of the longest serving in the Clinton administration, which you saw a lot of change over that time. Talk to me a little bit about when you're in the highest level of government, how you perceive advocacy inside of Washington.
Yeah, President Clinton is the master of politics. I mean, we all saw him at his best when he was really trying to win people over to his point of view. You probably remember there were a few government shutdowns and some other cliffhangers during the Clinton administration, but President Clinton was very much a student of everyone's congressional district and also their state. So he appealed to them about how it was in their political interest, how it was in their interest for their constituents to support the position that he was advocating for.
Linda, you are at the head of TechNet. The industry itself for so long was beloved by everyone. Both sides were really fond of the work that you were doing. That has shifted some. Will you talk a little bit about that shift for us?
Yeah, when I came to TechNet back in 2014, it was just the beginning of the white hat tech period, moving into the gray hat period. And it was also a period of not much getting done in D.C. We're at the very end of the Obama administration, and so not a lot of activity. And President Obama very much embraced the tech industry, as had presidents before him. And I knew that that would be so important as D.C. was slowing down on tech regulations. The states were just getting going because so much of the tech industry at that point was really consumer facing and not just sort of the back end plumbing of like a business or another enterprise.
So in most of the 1990s, the tech industry and really Microsoft and really Bill Gates had sort of ignored Washington. They didn't have lobbyists. They weren't making campaign donations. Bill Gates and his crew thought that they were the experts in the Silicon Valley, and Washington should sort of buzz off. And then in 1998, they were hit with this huge antitrust investigation. That was a huge pivot point in my mind in tech advocacy, when other tech companies, including Google, saw that happen and said, hey, in order to have a successful company, you need to have a successful Washington office.
Yeah, you have hit the nail on the head. It was a pivotal time. And as I alluded to before, there was a period of time when no one at the federal level or at the state level really expressed much interest in how tech works, much less how to regulate it. But this was a new and different thing when this antitrust case was brought against Microsoft. It was definitely a focus for the first time on how the companies were working. And it was a realization that this rather antiquated use of this law can be applied to new and emerging industries, tech in particular. And very much a recognition that politics matters, public perception of your company matters, the internal workings of your company to keep a check on antitrust policies and tendencies really matters. And yes, it still lives on today. Microsoft built a very big, successful, government relations operations, and other companies that have come along since, Google and others, have done the same thing. And they're very effective at interfacing with government in a way that I think is really important because policymakers at the federal level and state level are trying to work on so many issues that impact their constituents. They can't be expected to be tech experts. So it's really important that we take our job in the tech industry very seriously of what our job really is, and that's to educate policymakers on how the tech works and how to achieve what it is they're trying to do.
There are so many threads to pull in that policy space, though. I'm under the impression that there are over 1,000 pieces of legislation in the states alone only related to AI.
That's true.
How in the world is TechNet keeping track of all of that and keeping all of that moving in a way that's positive and going to be good for industry?
Yeah, it is a hard job. We have a wonderful state team. We have someone who heads it, who's based in Austin, and then we have 8 regional executive directors who run their regions across the country, and they're supported by 20 state contract lobbyists. We use really wonderful software to help us track all of the bills and all of the issues, but our executive directors are based in the state capitals of greatest importance and impact to the industry.
Smart.
Yeah, so because that being on the ground and having those relationships and being well respected and well regarded and trusted by policymakers is very, very important. Integrity is everything, right? No matter what job you have. And so we really take our job seriously in representing all parts of the tech ecosystem. AI is just the latest to completely dominate, a lot of the agendas for state legislatures. Before that, privacy and content online was really the dominant issue. But TechNet is so broad. We have not only hardware and software, social media companies, we have fintech, we have autonomous vehicles, we have drones, we have venture capital. I mean, we work on 25 different issue sets. And so our state team in particular, they know that they have the hardest job there is out there. And I joke that if you can make it doing state policy at TechNet, you can do anything.
It dawned on me just when you say that, though, as much as we talk about AI and the force multiplier that it really is in the workforce, in really every aspect of our life, it's still that on-the-ground connection that folks have in those communities that really probably makes the most difference as it relates to knowing what's coming and how to really move those legislative actions.
It really does. Knowing the political dynamics, knowing the legislative process, but as you said, most important, having those relationships with the policymakers so that they really will want to meet with you and hear you out and listen to how best to achieve their goals working with you.
Our family started Cane Brew with a dream and a lot of hard work. Now we're thriving, growing, and hiring. Artificial intelligence has made all the difference for our business. We're a case study for how AI is strengthening American manufacturing. Washington needs to help AI flourish. It's vital to our economic security. We cannot let China dominate these technologies. America must innovate and win. Let's protect our competitive edge.
We're back with Linda Moore on the Deciders. I wanted to ask you about tech and AI. Can you talk about what the AI industry has done to have its eyes and ears in Washington?
Yeah, I think that everyone in the AI industry in particular realized that this is a very complex technology and very easy to get wrong and misunderstand. So it was very important for all of the companies to engage very early and often with the Biden administration as we go back a couple of years, and then also with Congress to explain what it was about and also to help pave the path to proper regulation of it. And it will also just increase our economic prosperity and also our global competitiveness. But it's really important that the U.S. lead the world in AI regulation and set international standards so that we can be sure that it's done responsibly and safely.
Digital service taxes. I'm under the impression that that's an emerging issue. You mentioned international. You mentioned there is a lot of layers from my understanding on that particular issue. Will you talk a little bit about that? Maybe we could understand a little bit better after we're done today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, several countries around the world have enacted digital services taxes. And they are doing that so that they can reap some of the benefit from the profits that the largest U.S. innovators are garnering around the world. Now, we should be really proud of U.S. innovation. I mean, it contributes so greatly to not only our economic prosperity, but our global competitiveness and our national security. There are a lot of countries who would love to have what we have here in the U.S. And digital services taxes are used to make sure that they have a chance to fill their own government coffers with the profits of America's largest companies. It's also a way to prop up their own homegrown tech companies, because with a higher tax on American technology, then there's a lower threshold, lower cost for their own homegrown technology companies.
You mentioned Congress. It seems like so many of the big issues these days, immigration, the digital services, taxes, trade, tariffs, are handled by the executive branch, or really Donald Trump directly. Has Congress become irrelevant?
No, they really are. We engage with them on all these issues. It's important to make sure, because, executive branches, the presidents come and go. They're every 4 years, right? We have an election. And it's important to really focus on those members of Congress who do really care about these issues and do have this kind of oversight in their purview. So we very much engage with Congress on tariffs, on immigration, especially on immigration, since only real change, significant change, is congressionally driven. It can't be done by executive branch in that area. Tariffs, as we've seen, has gone before the Supreme Court. So, that is an issue that we have long been opposed to, and we've made that clear to the Trump administration. It injects a lot of uncertainty into the business climate, and that's exactly the opposite of what business does best in operating in. But the executive branch and Congress, both very important on all these issues.
How do you get your membership to stay focused on the long term when there's so much going on in the short term?
I think we're all pretty good about that. Those of us doing government relations, but also the leader of the companies. It really comes from the top of the companies, the CEOs. They have to stay focused on the long term, because they know that the noise of the day, the noise of the week, the noise of the month isn't going to build their company long term. So they're looking at the global implications of their investments and their strategy. And that's something that we all keep in mind day to day as well.
And in terms of longer term goals and policy, you guys scored a bunch of wins in the tax bill. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, there was a lot that needed to get done in that tax bill. We had a long list, and we achieved all of them. So I have to say, members of both parties, really focused in on the issues, and we did work both sides of the aisle, even though we knew it would be Republican votes only. And I think all the Republican committee chairs and the Trump administration took all the negotiations on that very seriously, and really were happy to meet with business and took into account very seriously everything that we were advocating for. The things that we cared about the most in it were there needed to be a recognition that research and development is hugely important, and that had really subsided in the U.S. compared to other countries. And that is where future prosperity comes from, and also technological and medical breakthroughs come from. So there was a recognition that they needed to support that. There was also in the tax bill provisions that really support entrepreneurs and startups. Hugely important. Those are the companies that grow and increase jobs, level of activity, and prosperity.
I'm curious how it is you are distilling complex issues to an audience that has to understand a lot of different issues every day.
It is, that's probably the most difficult but fun part of the job of being at TechNet. And I would say this for our entire team. It requires us to be subject matter experts to a point on every issue affecting the tech industry. And there's so many, because once you understand it, you then can pivot to how can I help other people understand it.
I want to talk a little bit more. We could talk all day really about AI, but I know we've got a couple more questions about it specifically.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by how AI will interact with energy and electricity prices. AI and AI data centers and their construction require so much electricity that's pulling electricity off the grid for regular Americans. How does the industry work with utilities to try to get more energy on the grid?
Yeah, that's an issue that we're focused on a lot right now, as you can imagine. There are all different kinds of ways that the companies are dealing with this. They are working out deals with the utility companies and with the state so that they can not drain, the needed energy that is required for homes and businesses, that they also put in their fair share to pay for upgrades to the infrastructure. Because let's face it, the energy infrastructure in America, electricity in particular, is woefully inadequate. It's been ignored for a long time. And so here at this time when we need a lot more energy, we really need to invest in the infrastructure. And so you also see companies who are purchasing and building their facilities right next to nuclear plants. And then we also have new facilities being built, and the companies are setting up their own water and power supply on site. So, I'm really focused on making sure that regular businesses and families have all the energy they need, that the companies aren't taxing communities and grids to the point where it's a problem, and that we can do what we do best, which is help lift up communities, expand the tax base, invest in the communities, and help shoulder the burden that the community already needs of building up their local infrastructure on electricity, because it's been ignored for way too long.
Definitely keep an eye on it. It'll come up in the midterms for sure.
Who do you think will be blamed in the midterms if electricity prices go up?
Well, that's the big question, right? We have a lot of different things that are contributing to a murky story right now. So I think that will all be sorted out, hopefully, in the next year. But you've got different players involved in this that all want to protect their own interest, right?
Sure.
So, but the bottom line is people, get alarmed when costs go up and are alarmed about affordability right now. And private equity has now gotten into the business of purchasing utility companies because they see it as a growth margin for them, because they know demand for energy is going to increase. And so that is driving costs up in some areas too, in addition to the work that needs to go into upgrading our inadequate electricity system.
A message from our partners at Quorum. The secret weapon you heard Linda Moore mention for tracking legislation? That's Quorum, the same intelligence the most influential teams in D.C. use to stay ahead. But here's the truth. If you're only tracking bills, you're already behind. In a 24-hour news cycle, you need to move as fast as the policy does. That's why Quorum built Quincy, the first AI specifically for government affairs. It doesn't just turbocharge legislative analysis. It pulls insights from executive actions, knows about past meetings, summarizes transcripts, surfaces advocacy engagement trends, drafts outreach in seconds, and so much more. Policy doesn't wait for a weekly report. If you want to see the specific AI tools Linda's team uses to stay ahead of the curve, head over to quorum.us. That's quorum.us. Linda, on every episode of The Deciders, we ask each decider the same 3 questions.
In your time at TechNet, what do you think is one of the best decisions you've made?
Oh, to grow my state program. Our 50-state program is not only the biggest and the best in the tech industry, it's widely recognized as the best 50-state program in any industry. That's a decision I made when I started TechNet in 2014 to really get into the business of being the advocacy organization at the 50-state level. And it has just grown over time, and it is still amazingly effective. We had an 89% success rate this year. There aren't a lot of folks who can say that they really challenge themselves to meet that 85+ success rate every single year. It takes a lot of work.
Congratulations. That's a really great percentage to have reached.
Yeah.
I think the hardest question of the 3 questions is, what's a decision you would do over?
I would have found a way to spend more time on putting together an AI regulatory framework. I would have found a way to keep those in the Senate and the House who were making great progress last year on an AI regulatory framework. I would have kept that work going, because we're now coming back to it and we've lost some time.
What is one thing Washington is not thinking about that they should be?
I think the biggest thing is what AI can do to increase job creation and prosperity. It's being looked at as something that is, people don't understand it, or they might even fear it, but it can have major positive impacts on the workforce. And so I would say that, the ability to democratize access to learning things, skills. AI is the one tool that teaches you how to use it.
Well, Linda, thanks so much for joining us on The Deciders.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
It's about what's happening on this end of Pennsylvania Avenue.
If it's important to the 535 members, it's important to us.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535. We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
live every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 3 hours a day. 535.news.
That was Linda Moore from TechNet. Lisa, what do you think?
I can't get over the volume of legislation that TechNet must be watching in every corner of the country and the globe. And it sounds like that's something that Linda built from the time that she was there. It's super impressive. It's unfathomable how much change is really going to happen even over the course of the next 12 months.
Yeah, so the thought that I came away with is how important advocacy is for people's business. I mean, for most of the last 50 years, I think a lot of companies have thought the way to run your business is to be a good business person and you don't need to focus on DC. But it's so fascinating to talk about that antitrust trial involving Microsoft that started in 1998. Because one thing that happened is that Google and other tech companies learned so much from that, learned how because Microsoft ignored Washington, they got bit, they were dragged in this antitrust fight, which they eventually won. But it took them 10 years, millions of dollars to get out of. And also that during that time, while Microsoft was distracted by that antitrust case and spending all this money and time and resources in Washington, a little company called Google was building itself up in Washington, and they wanted to be the next to Microsoft. And they really won. I mean, someone told me the other day that maybe had Microsoft not been involved in that antitrust case, and in fact been working on innovating and finding the next thing, that we'd all be Binging instead of Googling.
How about that? That's really, and to think that was really that pivotal moment
100%
for the industry. Well, thanks so much for joining us for The Deciders.
The Deciders is hosted by Brody Mullins and Lisa Camuso Miller and produced by Dave Toby. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Find more online at deciders.show and follow The Deciders on YouTube, LinkedIn, and X.